Two Australians, same year, same 100 grand. One of them walked into a bank in 2016 and signed a mortgage. The other opened a brokerage app on his phone and bought ETFs. 10 years later, only one of them is actually wealthy. And it's not the one you think. There's a quiet conversation happening in this country right now. It happens at backyard barbecues in Western Sydney, in FIFO crew rooms in the Pilbara, in Melbourne cafes where the coffee costs more than the tip. Australians are starting to whisper the same question, and nobody wants to say it out loud. Did we get the wealth equation completely wrong? Because for 40 years, this country has been built on one religion: bricks, mortar, land. The sacred Australian belief that property is the only real way to get rich. Your grandparents bought a fibro house in 1972 for 18 grand. It's now worth 1.4 million. Case closed. End of argument. Pass the lamb chops. But something cracked between 2016 and 2026, and the numbers tell a story that nobody at the dinner table is ready to hear. Meet Liam. 31. Electrician. Lives in a place called Werribee on the outer west of Melbourne. In 2016, he scraped together $100,000 in deposit money. Savings, a small inheritance from his nan, and 3 years of working shutdowns at refineries. He buys a $450,000 house. Standard suburban brick veneer. 2-car garage. A patch of grass out the back that the dog never uses. He borrows $350,000 at a variable rate. Across the country, in a fluorescent lit share house in Brunswick, there's Maya. Same age. Graphic designer. She also has 100 grand. She doesn't buy a house. She can't stomach the debt, so she dumps the entire lot into a boring portfolio. VAS, VGS, A200. Australian and global index funds. Then she does something almost nobody does in this country. She just leaves it alone. For 10 years, neither of them touches their decision. And what happens next is the part nobody on talkback radio wants to talk about. Let's run Liam's numbers, the honest ones, not the dinner party version. His house, on paper, doubles, from $450,000 to roughly $900,000 by 2026. That sounds like a miracle. That sounds like the Australian dream working exactly as advertised. 450 grand of pure equity gain. Cue the champagne. But here's where the documentary cameras pan to the receipts. Mortgage interest over 10 years, riding through the 2022 rate hikes, around $280,000. Council rates, 25 grand. Insurance, 18. Water, another 9. The hot water system that exploded in winter. The roof that needed redoing after a storm. The fence the neighbor reversed into. The heat pump, the carpets, the painter. Conservatively, $55,000 in maintenance over the decade. Stamp duty when he bought it. Around $23,000 gone the day he signed. Added up. Liam has spent roughly $410,000 to own this house over 10 years. His equity gain is $450,000. His net? 40 grand, maybe 60 if you're generous with the auction price. Over 10 years, on a $100,000 deposit. Now hold on, say the property faithful. He had to live somewhere. Rent would have cost him money too. Fair point, so we'll come back to that. Because first, we need to talk about Maya. Her 100 grand sits in ETFs from 2016. The ASX 200 between 2016 and 2026 returns roughly 9.2% per year, including dividends. Global shares, hedged back to Aussie dollars, return closer to 11. She splits the difference. 100,000 compounding at around 10% annually for 10 years. Becomes $259,000. But Maya isn't a passive character in this story. She doesn't have a mortgage eating her paycheck. She doesn't have council rates. She doesn't have a hot water system trying to kill her on a Tuesday night. So every year, she drips an extra 10 grand into the same ETFs. Money Liam doesn't have because the bank already took it. By 2026, Maya's portfolio is sitting at roughly $430,000. She paid rent the whole time. Let's be brutally fair. 10 years of Melbourne sharehouse rent, conservatively $180,000. Gone. Burned. So her real net worth from that original 100 grand, around $250,000 after rent. Liam's net worth from his 100 grand, closer to 60. And this is the moment the Australian dream starts to shake. But the math is only half the documentary. The other half is what's happening inside their heads. Liam wakes up at 5:20 every morning. He drives an hour to a job site. He works overtime so he can knock down the principal. He hasn't taken a real holiday since Bali in 2019. When rates went up in 2022, his repayments jumped by $900 a month, and his wife stopped sleeping through the night. He's the success story. He's the one who did what his old man told him to do. He's the one with the house. And he feels poor, constantly, quietly, the kind of poor that doesn't have a name. Maya works from a co-working space in Collingwood. She still rents. Her parents bring it up at every family gathering like a slow leak in the room. She has no equity, no land, no assets she can stand on and photograph, but she also has no debt, no rates notice, no leaky roof. Her phone shows a number that grows even when she's asleep. She doesn't feel rich either, because in Australia, you're not allowed to feel rich unless you own a house. That's the rule. That's the cultural contract. This is the part nobody talks about. The psychological tax of the Australian dream. Because what Liam bought wasn't really a house. He bought identity. He bought belonging. He bought the right to sit at the table and have his parents nod approvingly. He bought a story he could tell himself when he looked in the mirror. And what Maya bought was just numbers on a screen, invisible, unphotographable, impossible to brag about at a Sunday roast. But here's the cruel twist this country isn't ready for. The numbers don't lie. Leverage cuts both ways. Property only beats shares in this scenario if you're holding multiple properties, using the bank's money aggressively, claiming negative gearing, and timing the market like a professional. The single homeowner occupier, the suburban Aussie battler the politicians pose with, is statistically getting beaten by a teenager with a Vanguard app. That isn't an opinion. That's 10 years of compounding doing what compounding does. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because if this is true, if the family home is actually a mediocre investment dressed up as a national religion, then what does it say about a country that pours its entire identity into it? What does it say about politicians who design tax systems around it? What does it say about parents who told their kids to buy a house at any cost, while ETFs quietly outperformed in the background for 2 decades? It says we built a nation around an asset that pays its dividends in feelings instead of dollars. And the feelings are real. The pride of owning is real. The smell of a new place, the thud of your own front door, the garden you can plant a lemon tree in. Nobody is taking that away. Nobody should. But somewhere between 1985 and 2026, this country quietly swapped the goal of building wealth for the goal of looking wealthy. And a generation of younger Australians, locked out of the housing market, are starting to realise something their parents never had the data to see. You don't need a house to be wealthy in Australia. You just need to stop confusing the house with the wealth. Liam isn't a failure. Maya isn't a winner. They're both just Australians, born into the same decade, who made different bets on the same dream. One bet on bricks. One bet on patience. And the patient one, quietly, almost invisibly, came out ahead. Most Australians feel this now, even the ones who'd never say it at a barbecue. The system that made our grandparents rich isn't quite making us rich the same way. And until we admit that out loud, we'll keep working 60 hours a week to chase an idea of wealth that stopped being the best math somewhere around the second decade of this century.